My name is J.M. Harper. I'm the director of As We Speak, which is a documentary about rap lyrics in the criminal justice system.
I was really interested in just getting. I feel like I knew somewhat of the issue, somewhat of the fact that the words I wrote could land me into a situation that was bigger than me. Um, but it almost feels unbelievable, and so I was excited to talk to people that like really went through it, like to get the sort of emotional sort of significance of it all, and to really see. I don't use this phrase lightly, but like how far the rabbit hole goes, um, it it's a lot deeper than people realize, and a lot more nuanced.
It's hard to believe even when I hear it now, but it's absolutely true. This is something I've been researching for more than a decade now, and what my the primary finding is that, like you said, rap lyrics are being weaponized and criminalized in the criminal justice system in a way that no other fictional form, musical or otherwise, is being targeted. And I work on these cases. I've probably worked in some capacity on over 100. I testify in trials across the country trying to educate juries because the stakes are high. Not only are people being put behind bars, but in some cases, people are facing the death penalty, in part because their lyrics were used against them. And so this is something that is really important to me, and why I'm really, really excited that this film is going to, help spread the word. Like you said, it's going to be revelatory for many people in the audience. We're trying to change that.
Yeah, it's something that making the documentary gave me a perspective. I was learning that for prosecutors, it's not a matter of justice; it's a matter of a win or a loss, because their job in our criminal justice system is to prosecute and to get a conviction, and by any means necessary. And if they have a tool at their disposal, they're going to use it. And this particular tool of using rap lyrics, they have trainings on it. They know exactly the effect that will have on a jury to bring up rap lyrics completely devoid of context to a jury that maybe their kid listens to rap music, maybe they hear it on the radio, but when the lyrics are presented without the music and with zero cultural context, you can imagine that the effect is different than what the artist intended when they wrote it. And yeah, lastly, what I'd say about that is that when it comes to uh, the job of prosecutors versus law enforcement, we spent a lot of time in the edit trying to decide at what point of the journey do we start when somebody's arrested, and do we talk about what we found out from voices like John Hamasaki, who is a former police commissioner, about the power of the police unions and how we can teach anybody, any police officer, anything in the academy, but when you get into the car on the beat and you get turned to by a more seasoned police officer and they say, here's how we really do it. We wondered, do we start there? But it was just too big of a story, and there are other documentaries who kind of cover that aspect. So we dealt specifically with, doesn't matter how you got there, doesn't matter if you're guilty or innocent, but when you're in the seat and they use rap lyrics, they use your lyrics against you. That is where we focused, because that's where legislation can be effective, and that's where the fight is happening. And that is, I think, when it comes to the First Amendment, a train that anybody can get on, and say, I do care about the freedoms of speech that we're supposed to have constitutionally.
I was going to echo that. That is where the fight is happening right now. Is we are pushing legislation in states across the country and at the federal level in order to limit the misuse of rap lyrics as evidence. We've seen progress. California had passed a law. We even got a law passed in Louisiana, of all places. And so we are going state by state, and of course at the federal level. And we're really, really hopeful that this film will help provide really some much needed momentum to so that we can really realize some actual change on this.
It's weird. It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I feel like most artists choose to just take the risk, you know. Um, uh, and a lot of us are sort of in the position where the art is a way to get out of the situations that we're in, the difficult, environments that we grow up in. And, unfortunately, there is a sort of specific sound that, suggests that would lead to success. And that is right in the sort of line of fire. Um, and so to survive, a lot of people are going right toward that light, regardless of the dangers of it. Again, it's sort of like the thing that will bring you success is also the thing that the thing that you could potentially be sort of persecuted for.
I was just going to add that you do see artists now. I think there are some artists who are more cognizant of the risks, and so you are starting to hear rappers make entire songs about how their lyrics are fictional.
Yeah.
That is something you would not have heard even 10 years ago.
Or add disclaimers to
Or
the beginning.
and we're seeing more of that where they're putting disclaimers at the beginning of their videos saying all this is props, we're not really gang members, that type of thing. Maybe that is a savvy thing to do, but it's really unfortunate from an artistic perspective because that's evidence of chilled speech, and that's the thing that the First Amendment is supposed to protect against, and it isn't here.
It was amazing in looking at the archival for the documentary to choose out of the plethora of examples of violent lyrics, but really to look and see the example of Queen, on a stage and millions of people singing along. Mama, just killed a man, put a gun, put a trigger to his head, pulled the trigger, now he's dead. Like millions singing along, and to understand that the double standard is so clear as to be. I mean, it's almost a joke. So, but I love the word that you use when you think about the parchment that the Constitution was written on. Of course, that had many exceptions to Black people then, and so for it to be the same way now is not so much a surprise as as just a call to action, to make sure that double standard gets erased as best we can in our lifetimes. It's true.
And the Constitution does permit, honestly, it still does permit slavery if you're incarcerated. And so it's not a coincidence that this is the tool that the state has used to target African American citizens using whatever they can, by what you said, by any means necessary. So if they can weaponize this art form, even though I believe many of these prosecutors understand full well that the way they're depicting the music is not actually what it is. They are aware of it. I mean, it's the most listened to genre in the United States, probably globally. I mean, at this point, to claim total ignorance of it is laughable, but it is consistent with what we've seen for a very long time, the disproportionate targeting of young men, particularly of color, in the criminal justice system or the criminal legal system.
And hopefully, especially not to spoil it, but when we get into the finale of the documentary, we really try to depict what happens in a courtroom, not just through talking head interviews, but to try to show and to show through the journey of the documentary Kemba as a character wrestling with whether or not he should put himself at the mercy of the system and come out on the other side feeling like he's received justice, and the theater of prosecutors, the theater of the courtroom, the fact that those people are artists in and of their own, so they have to weave a story, they have to use their words to put together a narrative onto something, and then try to feed that to juries or to a judge. It's all theater, and it's one of the lines from the film when Kimba enters into the courtroom. He harkens back to Shakespeare saying, what was that Shakespeare said? All the world's a stage. And so whether you're on one stage or another, part of the documentary is teaching people to realize that what we're dealing with is something that's a human story. It's the same story that we've been talking about, that people like Shakespeare have been talking about since the late 1500s. And it's understanding the vastness of that, and that hip hop is in the long link of a chain of Black genres, and that this is just the latest and greatest institutional weapon that exists. only upon recognition of that can I think we start to look at what might be possible for change. And one of the artists that we spoke to in L.A., Glasses Malone, and he was talking about black artists being erased from the history of rock and roll. Like, yeah, but you wouldn't remember that all of these black artists coming from traditions of folk and then blues and rhythm and blues and rock and roll. And those are the earliest giants of rock and roll being black. And then, of course, in the documentary, you see the archival where yes, white supremacist power is extremely freaked out that this music is starting to fuse cultural and racial boundaries, and that if we can enjoy the music together, maybe we're not so different. And that was very as a problem. And
Even non-lyrical jazz was seen as threatening, right? Because because white people liked it, it led to the commingling of black and white people. And yeah, I mean, I think, and I guarantee you now, yeah, I guess one thing, I'll be fast about it, but one thing that surprises me is that a lot of these biases about rap music persist, even though we should be much more educated about it. It's become a cultural juggernaut. It's affected us in terms of our fashion, our lexicon, you name it. But what I think it is that many people, even though they understand it, they now start to feel surrounded by it. And now all of a sudden, it's not something that they can push to the margins. And I think that in and of itself is threatening to people.
This whole experience has been surreal. But yeah, I'm excited for the movie to come out, just for the conversation to continue and to grow, and to hopefully be to like pull down the veil on these sort of misconceptions and preconceived notions and biases that people have and don't even know it, especially in cities that are not big cities. I feel like a lot of us know about the situation. Even hip hop fans know about the situation, but only to the extent of these big cases like the Young Thug trial, and it's happening way more to people that can't afford $1 million lawyers. It's happening way more to people that aren't seen as like artists by career, and so those people have a way harder time. And so if we could sort of pull down the veil, maybe we could hold the system accountable.